You think you know everything about BTS? Then answer this. Who walks into the recording booth, drops a flawless take in minutes, and leaves producers absolutely speechless? And who's the perfectionist that spends hours, maybe an entire night, obsessing over a single breath between lines? Producers who've sat behind the glass with Bangtan have quietly spilled details about the insane speed gap between these 7 men. And trust me, some of these answers will flip everything you thought you knew. Why do some BTS tracks feel so razor sharp, while others carry this deep, haunting, emotional weight? That's not just talent, that's process. So if a producer ranked all 7 from slowest to fastest, where does your bias land? Let's get into it.
Number 7. BTS V. Now, before you lose your mind in the comments, hold on, breathe, and hear this out. Because landing at number 7 doesn't mean what you think it means. This isn't about lack of talent. This isn't about being bad in the studio. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Kim Taehyung sits at the bottom of this speed ranking precisely because of how deeply, how obsessively, how almost spiritually he approaches the recording process. Producers who've worked with BTS over the years have consistently pointed out one thing about V. The man does not record a song, he experiences it. And that experience, it takes time, a lot of time. Let's set the scene. Picture this. It's somewhere around 2 or 3 a.m. at Hybe's recording studio in Yongsan-gu, Seoul. Most of the other members have already finished their parts. The engineers are sipping their 4th cup of coffee. And then there's Taehyung, still in the booth, headphones slightly tilted off one ear, eyes closed, murmuring the same 4-bar phrase over and over again. Not because he made a mistake, not because the producer asks him to redo it, but because he heard something in his head, a texture, a color, a feeling that hasn't come out of his mouth yet, and he will not leave that booth until it does. This is the thing about V that most casual fans don't understand. His voice isn't just deep, it's architecturally complex. That baritone sits in a frequency range that is notoriously difficult to mix in pop music. Most K-pop producers are used to working with higher tenors and bright vocal tones that cut through a mix easily. But Taehyung's voice lives in the lower mid-frequency spectrum, which means every single recording decision matters more. The way he pronounces a vowel, the amount of air he pushes through a phrase, the micro-dynamics between a whisper and a belt, all of it has to be surgical. And Taehyung knows this. He's talked about it in multiple interviews. During the making of Layover, his solo album released in September 2023, he mentioned that he would sometimes record a single verse 20, 30, even 40 times. Not because any of those takes were wrong, but because each one had a slightly different emotional temperature, and he wanted to find the exact one that matched the story he was trying to tell. Think about that for a second. 40 takes of the same verse, not because of errors, because of emotional precision. P-Dog, BTS's primary producer who has been with the group since their debut in 2013, once talked about how working with Taehyung in the studio is like watching an artist mix paint on a palette. He doesn't just sing a line, he experiments with it. He'll try a breathy delivery, then a chesty one, then one where he slightly nasalizes the tone to give it a vintage quality. He'll ask the engineer to play back the instrumental without his vocals, close his eyes, feel the track, and then go back in and try something completely different from anything he'd done in the last hour. It's creative, it's beautiful, and it is absolutely time-consuming. There's a famous story from the Butter recording sessions in 2021 that perfectly captures this. While most of the vocal line members came in, recorded their parts with relative efficiency, and moved on, Taehyung reportedly spent extra hours experimenting with ad-libs and vocal textures that weren't even in the original demo. He wanted to add these low, almost jazzy undertones to his sections, little growls, subtle pitch bends, half-whispered doubles, things that most listeners would never consciously notice, but would absolutely feel. And here's the kicker. Some of those experiments actually made it into the final mix. That barely audible low hum you hear in certain parts of Butter, that wasn't in the original arrangement. That was Taehyung at 4 a.m. going, "What if I try this?" And the producer going, "Okay, that's actually insane. Keep it." But this approach comes with a cost: time. Lots of it. While other members might finish their recording in a single session, Taehyung has been known to stretch across multiple sessions for one song. Not because he's slow in the traditional sense, but because his creative process is non-linear. He doesn't walk into the booth with a fixed plan. He walks in with a feeling, and he follows that feeling wherever it leads. Sometimes it leads to magic in 20 minutes. Sometimes it leads to a 6-hour journey through 15 different vocal approaches before landing on something that makes the producer's jaw drop. And let's talk about Singularity for a moment, his solo intro track for the Love Yourself Tear album in 2018. That song is widely considered one of the most vocally stunning pieces in BTS's entire discography. The smoky, jazz noir delivery, the controlled vibrato, the way his voice wraps around the neo-soul production like silk, none of that was accidental.
Number 6. Jimin. If you guessed Park Jimin, give yourself a round of applause, because honestly, who else could it be? The man whose entire artistic identity is built on an almost terrifying level of self-demand. The idol who is literally broken down in tears inside the recording booth because he felt his voice wasn't conveying the exact emotion he envisioned. The performer who, after delivering a take that made everyone in the control room nod in approval, would pull off his headphones and quietly say, "One more, I can do better." That's Jimin, and that's exactly why he lands at number 6 on this ranking. Not because he lacks ability, but because his own internal standard operates on a level that borders on the superhuman. Let's rewind to the beginning, because to understand why Jimin takes the time he does in the recording booth, you need to understand where he came from. Park Jimin didn't enter Big Hit Entertainment as a vocalist. Let that sink in. He was recruited as a dancer, a contemporary dance prodigy from Busan Arts High School who had absolutely zero formal vocal training when he walked through those trainee doors. While other trainees had been singing since childhood, Jimin was learning how to control his voice from scratch while simultaneously mastering choreography, learning to rap, studying Japanese, and dealing with the soul-crushing pressure of the idol trainee system. That background created something very specific inside him, a deep, permanent awareness that his voice was something he had to earn, not something he was born with. And that awareness follows him into every single recording session to this day. Producers have noted, across multiple eras, that Jimin approaches the booth like someone preparing for battle. Not a battle against the song, but a battle against himself. He'll listen to the demo meticulously, often more times than any other member, studying not just the melody, but the intention behind every phrase. He'll ask the producer questions that most vocalists never think to ask. What was the songwriter feeling when they wrote this line? Should I sing this with hope or with the memory of hope? Is this sadness active, or is it the kind of sadness that's already accepted? These aren't casual questions. These are the questions of someone who refuses to just sing notes. He wants to mean every single syllable, and that search for meaning takes time. During the recording of Filter for the 2020 album Map of the Soul 7, Jimin's approach was a masterclass in vocal perfectionism. The song required a completely different vocal persona, sultry, confident, almost theatrical. It was a massive departure from his typical emotive high-register style. Producers reportedly worked with Jimin across multiple sessions as he experimented with lowering his natural placement, adding a smokier quality to his tone, and finding a delivery that felt seductive without losing sincerity. The thing is, he could have nailed a good enough version in the first session. Multiple people in the room apparently told him as much. But good enough doesn't exist in Jimin's vocabulary. He kept pushing, kept refining, kept stripping away layers until he found a version that didn't just sound right, it felt right. And when you listen to Filter now, that liquid smooth confidence you hear, that was forged through hours of a man fighting his own doubt until the doubt had nowhere left to hide. Now, let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, Jimin's vocal instrument itself. His voice sits in a unique place within BTS's vocal line. He's a high tenor with a naturally bright, almost crystalline quality that can cut through any mix like a laser. But that brightness comes with a challenge. Any imperfection, any slight pitch waver, any moment where the breath support isn't locked in, it's immediately audible. There's no warmth to hide behind, no lower frequencies to cushion a less than perfect moment. When Jimin sings, everything is exposed, and he knows it.
That's why he's meticulous. That's why he records take after take, because in his frequency range, the margin for error is razor thin, and he has trained himself to hear flaws that most human ears would never catch. P-Dog and other producers have spoken about this phenomenon with a mix of admiration and gentle frustration. There have been sessions where Jimin would deliver what everyone in the room considered a perfect take, pitch accurate, emotionally resonant, dynamically controlled, and he would shake his head. The breath at the end of the second phrase was too heavy, or I smiled at the wrong word and you can hear it in the tone. These are details so microscopic that they would require isolated, zoomed-in waveform analysis to even detect, and yet Jimin hears them in real-time playback and demands another take. It's a level of self-awareness that is frankly both inspiring and heartbreaking to witness.
Number 5. RM. Kim Namjoon, the leader, the brain, the man who doesn't just walk into the recording booth. He walks in carrying an entirely rewritten version of whatever was handed to him, a notebook full of alternate lyrics, 3 philosophical references he wants to weave into the second verse, and a quiet but absolute conviction that the original demo, no matter how good it was, can be better. And that right there is exactly why RM lands at number 5 on this list. He's not slow because of vocal insecurity like Jimin. He's not slow because of creative wandering like Taehyung. He's slow because before he even opens his mouth to record, he's already spent hours, sometimes days, deconstructing and reconstructing the song itself. The recording session is just the final step. The real work, that happened long before the microphone was ever turned on. To truly understand why Namjoon's recording process is the way it is, you have to understand something fundamental about who he is within BTS's creative ecosystem. RM is not just a performer, he's a songwriter, a producer, a lyricist, and the creative director of one of the biggest musical acts in human history. Since BTS's debut in June 2013, Namjoon has been credited on an absurd number of the group's tracks. We're talking well over 100 songwriting credits registered with the Korea Music Copyright Association, KMCA. That's not a stat you accumulate by walking into the booth, reading someone else's lyrics off a prompter, and walking out. That's a stat you build by being deeply, obsessively, almost pathologically involved in every syllable that comes out of your group's discography. And that involvement is precisely what makes his recording process longer than you'd expect. Here's how a typical RM recording session works, according to what producers and engineers have revealed over the years. Step 1, Namjoon receives the demo track and the guide lyrics. Step 2, and this is where things diverge from every other member, Namjoon takes those lyrics home, or to a cafe, or to a bench in a park somewhere in Seoul, and he sits with them, not for minutes, for hours, sometimes for days. He reads them, rereads them, cross-references them with the album's overarching concept, checks them against the thematic arc of the song's placement in the track list, and then, almost inevitably, starts rewriting. Not because the original lyrics were bad, but because Namjoon has this almost compulsive need for every word he delivers to carry philosophical weight, personal authenticity, and narrative coherence within the larger BTS universe. P-Dog has talked about this with a kind of exhausted admiration. He's described sessions where the production team would send Namjoon a finished track with guide rap verses, expecting him to come in the next day and lay down his parts. Instead, Namjoon would show up with an entirely new set of lyrics, different rhyme scheme, different thematic angle, different flow pattern, and say something like, "I think this connects better to what we said in the third track." The producers would look at each other, look at the new lyrics, realize he was absolutely right, and then spend the next several hours recording a verse that was fundamentally different from what they'd originally planned. This is brilliant. This is also incredibly time-consuming. Let's talk about a concrete example. During the creation of Tear, BTS's hip-hop track from the 2018 album Love Yourself Tear, Namjoon's process was particularly intense. The song dealt with the pain of separation, the lies people tell themselves to survive breakups, and the raw honesty of admitting that love has failed.
For most rappers, that's a prompt. You write some bars about heartbreak, deliver them with conviction, and move on. But Namjoon doesn't operate like most rappers. He reportedly wrote and rewrote his verse multiple times, each time digging deeper into personal experience, stripping away generic metaphors and replacing them with hyper-specific, almost uncomfortably honest imagery. The line about love being a sincerely wicked lie didn't come from a first draft. It came from a man sitting alone with his thoughts, peeling back layer after layer of emotional defense until he hit something real. And only after that excavation process was complete did he actually step into the booth to record. But here's the thing. Even once Namjoon is in the booth, the process doesn't suddenly speed up. Because RM's delivery style is technically demanding in ways that casual listeners often underestimate. He raps in a low-mid register with complex rhythmic patterns that frequently play against the beat rather than sitting on it. His flow incorporates intentional syncopation, tempo shifts within a single bar, and these subtle dynamic changes where he drops from an aggressive punch to a near whisper in the space of 2 words. Executing that consistently across multiple takes requires serious concentration and physical control. He can't just read the words fast. He has to perform them with attitude, with precision, with the exact emotional energy that matches the lyrics he spent 2 days writing. And if a take doesn't feel right, if the anger isn't angry enough, if the sadness sounds performed rather than felt, he'll stop, reset, and go again. There's also the matter of Namjoon's bilingual brain, which adds a fascinating layer to his recording timeline. RM is fluent in English, and he often thinks in both Korean and English simultaneously. This means that when he's writing and recording, he's constantly evaluating how a Korean phrase sounds versus how the same idea would land in English, and whether there's a way to blend both languages within a single bar that feels organic rather than forced. Listen to any of his solo work. Indigo, released in December 2022, is a perfect example, and you'll hear this bilingual fluidity throughout. Tracks like Wildflower featuring Eugene seamlessly weave Korean and English in ways that feel effortless. But that effortlessness is a carefully constructed illusion. Behind it are hours of Namjoon testing different language combinations, adjusting syllable counts to maintain rhythmic flow across 2 completely different linguistic structures, and re-recording lines where the language switch felt even slightly jarring. Now let's address something that separates Namjoon from the 2 members below him on this list. Unlike V and Jimin, whose recording time is primarily consumed by vocal performance, the act of singing, Namjoon's time is split between pre-production and performance. A significant chunk of his recording time isn't actually spent recording. It's spent in the control room with the producers, debating the arrangement, suggesting changes to the beat, proposing structural modifications like extending a bridge or cutting a pre-chorus. He's not just an artist waiting for instructions. He's a co-producer who happens to be the one stepping into the booth. And that dual role inevitably stretches the timeline. During the Map of the Soul 7 era, there were reportedly sessions where Namjoon spent the first 2 hours of a recording session not recording at all, but sitting at the production desk with P-Dog, adjusting the instrumental, tweaking the vocal processing chain, and discussing how the sonic landscape of a track should evolve from verse to chorus. Only after those creative decisions were locked in would he finally walk into the booth and start laying down his parts. This is why his total recording time is longer than you might expect for someone who is, by all accounts, a very capable and experienced recording artist. The actual recording, the act of rapping into a microphone, he can do that efficiently. It's everything that happens before and around the recording that adds hours to the clock. But let's give credit where credit is monumentally due. That obsessive pre-production process is a huge part of why BTS's music resonates on the level it does. The thematic depth of songs like Black Swan, the philosophical weight of Persona, the narrative coherence of an entire album like Love Yourself, that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because Kim Namjoon sits in a room alone for hours, refusing to accept a lyric that doesn't earn its place in the song. It happens because a leader cares enough about his group's artistic legacy to spend 3 hours rewriting a verse that was already fine.
Fine isn't good enough. Fine has never been good enough. And that beautiful, exhausting, time-consuming refusal to settle for fine is exactly what turned 7 boys from a small company into the biggest band on the planet. So yeah, Namjoon isn't the fastest in the studio, but the reason he's not the fastest is the reason BTS's discography reads like literature instead of a pop catalog. He doesn't record songs, he builds monuments. And monuments take time.
Number 4, Jin. Kim Seok-jin, the eldest. The man who was literally streetcast by a big hit entertainment scout in 2011 because of his face. Not his voice, not his dance skills, not his musical pedigree, his face. A film studies student at Konkuk University who had 0 background in music, 0 formal vocal training, and absolutely 0 reason to believe he'd one day be standing in a world-class recording studio laying down songs that would chart in over 100 countries. And yet here he is, sitting comfortably at number 4 on a speed ranking that has everything to do with efficiency, discipline, and the quiet transformation of a man who went from the most vocally uncertain member of BTS to one of the most dependable recording artists the producers have ever worked with. This is the story the fans don't talk about enough. This is the story of a voice that was built, brick by brick, session by session, tier by tier, from almost nothing into something genuinely remarkable. Let's go back to the beginning because it matters. When Jin entered Big Hit as a trainee, the gap between him and the other members in terms of musical ability was, by all honest accounts, significant. RM had been an underground rapper since his early teens. Suga had been producing music and performing in Daegu's hip-hop scene. J-Hope was a nationally recognized street dancer. Jimin was a top contemporary dance student. Taehyung had a natural vocal instrument that made trainers stop and listen. Jungkook had been selected from a pool of thousands for his raw, prodigious talent. And then there was Seok-jin, handsome, earnest, hard-working, and starting from almost 0. During those early trainee days, his vocal lessons were essentially remedial. He was learning things that the other vocalists already knew intuitively: breath support, pitch control, how to project without straining, how to navigate a melody without going flat on sustained notes. It was humbling. It was brutal. And by multiple accounts, there were moments when Jin seriously questioned whether he belonged in the group at all. Now fast forward to the recording studio during BTS's early albums, Too Cool for School, ORUL 82, School Love Affair. Producers from this era have been candid about the fact that Jin's recording sessions were the longest among the vocal line during those years. Not because he was exploring like Taehyung or obsessing like Jimin, but because the fundamental mechanics of his singing were still developing. He needed more takes to lock into pitch. He needed more guidance on where to breathe. He needed the producer to be more hands-on, literally coaching him through lines in a way that wasn't necessary with the other vocalists. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the stuff of fan-edited highlight reels. It was a man grinding through the unglamorous, repetitive, deeply frustrating work of building a skill he wasn't born with. And here's where the story gets extraordinary, because Jin didn't just improve, he transformed. Somewhere around the Wings era in 2016 and accelerating into Love Yourself in 2017-2018, something clicked. Producers started noticing that Jin's sessions were getting shorter, not because he was cutting corners, but because his vocal instrument had finally matured to a point where he could execute with consistency. The man who used to need 15 takes to nail a chorus was suddenly doing it in 5. The singer who used to struggle with breath control during emotional high notes was now delivering them with a stability that impressed even the vocal coaches. His solo track, Awake, from the 2016 Wings album, was a turning point that the production team has quietly referenced as the moment they realized Jin had crossed a threshold. The song demanded sustained high notes, controlled emotional delivery, and a kind of vocal vulnerability that you simply cannot fake. And Jin delivered. Not on the first take, not with the ease of a natural prodigy, but with the hard-earned precision of someone who had spent years training his voice to obey his heart. The recording of Awake was reportedly smoother than anyone on the team expected, and it marked the beginning of what engineers would later refer to as the smooth shift, the era where Jin's recording sessions stopped being unpredictable and became one of the most reliable blocks on the studio schedule. By the time BTS entered their global domination phase, DNA, Fake Love, Boy with Love, Dynamite, Jin had developed a recording discipline that was almost military in its efficiency. He'd arrive at the studio prepared. He'd already practiced his parts extensively at home. He'd already identified the phrases that might give him trouble and pre-worked solutions. He'd walk into the booth, put on his headphones, nod at the engineer, and get to work. No drama, no existential crises, no hours of experimentation, just focused, methodical, increasingly excellent execution. Producers started noticing something else too. Jin's ability to self-correct in real time had become remarkably sharp. In the early days, he'd need the producer to point out a pitch issue or a timing slip. By the Map of the Soul era, Jin was catching his own mistakes mid-take, stopping himself and immediately re-delivering the line correctly without needing external feedback. That level of self-monitoring is a sign of genuine vocal maturity, and it dramatically reduces recording time because the feedback loop between singer and producer becomes almost unnecessary. The singer becomes their own quality control, and that's exactly what Jin became. Let's talk about Epiphany, his solo intro for Love Yourself Answer in 2018. This song is, in many fans' estimation, one of the most emotionally powerful solo tracks in BTS's catalog. The chorus demands these soaring, belt-register high notes that sit right at the edge of Jin's comfortable range. It's the kind of song that could easily take hours to record because of how physically and emotionally demanding it is. And yet, by multiple accounts, Jin's recording of Epiphany was remarkably smooth. He came in prepared, he delivered with consistency, and while there were certainly multiple takes to get the nuances right, the session didn't drag into the marathon territory that it might have during the earlier eras. He had done the work, years of work, and that work was paying off in studio efficiency. Now, what keeps Jin at number 4 rather than higher on this list? It's a matter of vocal versus intuitive speed. The members above him on this ranking have a more instinctive, almost reflexive relationship with the recording process. They hear a melody, internalize it almost instantly, and reproduce it with minimal calibration. Jin's process, while vastly improved from his early days, still involves a degree of conscious preparation that the top 3 don't seem to need. He prepares more deliberately. He practices his parts before coming to the studio more extensively. His efficiency is earned through discipline rather than born from instinct. And that slight difference in preparation time is what separates number 4 from number 3. But let's be absolutely clear about something. The fact that Jin is at number 4 at all is one of the most inspiring stories in modern music. This is a man who was told, explicitly and implicitly, by trainers, by critics, by internet commenters, that he was the weakest vocalist in BTS. And instead of accepting that narrative, he quietly, stubbornly, relentlessly worked to disprove it. Not with words, not with clapbacks on social media, with hours in the practice room, with late-night vocal lessons, with session after session after session of grinding through his limitations until those limitations stopped existing. His solo single, The Astronaut, released in October 2022 and co-written with Coldplay, stands as a monument to that journey. The song's recording was reportedly one of the smoothest of his career, efficient, emotionally resonant, and delivered with the confidence of a man who had finally, fully, completely arrived as a vocalist. When you listen to The Astronaut and hear that voice, warm, steady, full of gentle power, you're not hearing natural talent. You're hearing the result of almost a decade of a man refusing to be defined by where he started. And honestly, that might be more impressive than being born with a perfect voice. Because talent is a gift, but transformation is a choice. And Kim Sok-jin chose it every single day, in every single recording session, until the boy who was cast for his face became the man whose voice makes millions cry.
Number 3. J-Hope. Jungkook, the man the industry sleeps on, the member that casual fans reduce to the happy one or the dancer without ever realizing that behind that sunshine exterior is one of the most disciplined, technically sharp, and devastatingly efficient recording artists in the entire K-pop landscape. J-Hope doesn't just enter the recording booth, he enters it like a surgeon entering an operating room. Gloves on, tools ready, zero wasted motion. And producers? Producers love him for it. They genuinely, deeply, almost unreasonably love booking J-Hope's recording sessions because they know with near absolute certainty that the session will run on time, the takes will be clean, and the man will deliver exactly what the song needs without a single unnecessary second spent searching for something that should have been found before walking through that door. That's J-Hope. That's number 3. And the story of how he got here is far more complex than his bright smile would ever let you believe. Let's start with something people forget. J-Hope's musical origin story is rooted in rhythm, not melody, not harmony, rhythm. Before he was an idol, before he was a rapper, before he was anything the world of K-pop would recognize, Jungkook was a street dancer in Gwangju. And not just any street dancer, he was a regional champion. He won a national dance competition in 2008 as part of a crew called Neuron, and his specialty was popping and locking, styles that demand absolute microscopic precision in timing. When you're a popper, your body has to hit on the exact millisecond of a beat. Not close to the beat, not roughly on the beat, the exact millisecond. A fraction of a second early or late, and the entire illusion collapses. That's the foundation Hoseok built his artistic identity on, rhythmic precision at an almost inhuman level. And that foundation translates directly into the recording booth in ways that most people never consider. When J-Hope records a rap verse, his internal clock is so accurate that producers have compared it to recording with a human click track. His syllables land on the beat with a consistency that reduces the need for post-production timing adjustments, a process called quantizing in music production that can eat up significant studio time. Most rappers, even very good ones, need at least some degree of quantizing after recording. Their syllables land slightly ahead or behind the grid, and the engineer has to manually nudge individual words to tighten up the rhythm. With J-Hope, that step is often dramatically minimized or skipped entirely. His takes come in so rhythmically locked that the raw recording practically sounds like the finished product. Sound engineers have quietly marveled at this. One of the reasons his sessions run fast isn't just that he needs fewer takes, it's that the takes he delivers require less post-production work. And in a professional studio environment where time is money and schedule is everything, that's an incredibly valuable trait. But rhythmic precision alone doesn't explain why J-Hope is this fast. What really sets him apart is his preparation ritual. And ritual is the right word, because this man treats pre-session prep with an almost religious devotion. Multiple sources over the years have painted a picture of Hoseok's recording prep that borders on obsessive in the best possible way. Before a scheduled recording session, J-Hope will typically spend extensive personal time with the track. He'll listen to the demo on repeat in his studio, during meals, while exercising, while lying in bed at night. He doesn't just memorize the words, he memorizes the feeling of the words inside the track. He practices his verses not just vocally, but physically, often rehearsing with the kind of full-body engagement that you'd normally associate with stage performance. By the time he actually walks into the studio on recording day, the song isn't something he's about to perform. It's something he's already been living with for days. He's already solved the problems. He's already identified the tricky rhythmic passages and worked out exactly how to navigate them. He's already decided where he wants to add ad-libs, where he wants to adjust his tone, where he wants to push aggressive, and where he wants to pull back into something smoother. The recording session for J-Hope is essentially a final exam that he's already studied for exhaustively, and that's why he aces it quickly. Let's talk about Chicken Noodle Soup, his 2019 collaboration with Becky G. That track was a technical nightmare from a recording standpoint. It required J-Hope to rap in Korean, sing melodic hooks, deliver lines in English, which is not his primary language, match the rhythmic energy of a Latin-influenced beat, and maintain the playful, high-energy vibe throughout without letting any of those technical demands show as effort.
That's a lot of plates to spin. And yet, by accounts from the production process, J-Hope's recording sessions for that track were remarkably efficient. He came in prepared, he executed with precision, and the production team was able to move through his parts without the extended creative exploration or emotional recalibration that some other members require. The energy was there from take one, the rhythm was locked from take one, the attitude was locked from take one. Adjustments were minor, a little more breath here, a slightly different inflection there, but the foundation was solid immediately. Now, let's get into something that elevates J-Hope from merely fast to genuinely fast and smart, his producer's ear. Starting with Hope World, his 2018 mixtape, Hoseok began seriously developing his skills as a music producer, not just a performer. He learned how tracks are built from the ground up. He learned about frequency ranges, compression, EQ, vocal chain processing, stereo imaging, the technical vocabulary of the recording studio. By the time Jack in the Box dropped in July 2022 as his first official solo album, J-Hope was functioning as a genuine co-producer on his own music, making decisions about not just what to perform, but how to capture that performance sonically. That production knowledge fundamentally changed how he operates in the booth. When a producer gives J-Hope a direction, like, can you bring more mid-range presence to this line, or try pulling back the sibilance on the S sounds, he doesn't just understand what they mean, he knows how to physically adjust his vocal delivery to achieve it in real time. Most performers hear production feedback as abstract, almost mystical suggestions. J-Hope hears them as specific, actionable instructions, because he understands the technical reality behind the words. That translation speed from producer feedback to physical execution dramatically reduces the back and forth that typically extends recording sessions. There's also an underappreciated aspect of J-Hope's recording efficiency, his emotional consistency. Unlike some members who need time to get into the emotional headspace of a song, Hoseok has this remarkable ability to access the required emotion almost on command. It's a skill that likely comes from his performance background. As a dancer and stage performer, he's trained himself to embody emotions quickly and fully, because live performance doesn't give you the luxury of warming up to a feeling. You hit the stage and you're on. That same switch exists in the booth. When the track calls for aggression, he's aggressive from take one. When it calls for vulnerability, like in Blue Side or On the Street with J. Cole, he accesses that softness without needing an extended emotional runway. He flips the switch, delivers, and moves forward. During the making of group tracks like Dionysus, Dis-Ease, and Run BTS, producers have noted that J-Hope's rap sections were consistently among the fastest to record. Not because his parts were simpler, Dionysus in particular features a ferociously complex rhythmic structure, but because his preparation to execution pipeline is so streamlined that the gap between ready and done is shorter than almost any other member. He walks in knowing exactly what he's going to do, does it with mechanical precision and genuine emotional fire, and walks out clean, efficient, professional in the most elevated sense of the word. But here's the beautiful tension at the heart of J-Hope's number 3 ranking. He's this efficient not because he doesn't care, but because he cares so much that he does the hard work before the session so the session itself can be pure execution. The hours of preparation, the obsessive rehearsal, the production knowledge accumulated over years of self-study, all of that invisible labor is what makes his visible studio time so impressively compact. He's not fast because he's casual, he's fast because he's prepared, and the difference between those two things is the difference between carelessness and mastery. So when you hear J-Hope on a track and his flow hits like a machine gun with a soul, precise but alive, technical but dripping with personality, know that what you're hearing is the result of a system built by a man who decided years ago that he would never waste a producer's time, never walk into the booth unprepared, and never let the gap between his intention and his execution be wider than a razor's edge.
Number 2. Suga.
Min Yoongi, August D. The man who doesn't just record music, he is music. The member who walks into the studio not as an artist waiting for instructions, but as the architect, the engineer, the performer, and the quality control all rolled into a terrifyingly efficient human being. When people talk about speed in the recording process, they're usually talking about how quickly someone can sing or rap their part. But with Sugar, speed means something entirely different. It means walking into a session, sitting down at the production desk, adjusting the beat he probably co-produced himself, rewriting a line on the spot because he heard something better in his head during the car ride over, stepping into the booth, delivering 3 takes with surgical precision, walking back to the desk, comping his own vocals, suggesting a mix adjustment to the engineer, and leaving, all within a time frame that makes other members' entire sessions look like marathons. That's not an exaggeration, that's Min Yoongi, and it's why he sits at number 2, a position that, if you understand the sheer absurdity of the person ranked above him, is nothing short of extraordinary. To understand why Sugar records at the speed he does, you need to understand that this man's relationship with music studios didn't start at Big Hit Entertainment. It started in a cramped, cheap studio in Daegu when he was a teenager, long before BTS was even a concept. Min Yoongi began producing beats and writing rap lyrics as a teenager, working in an underground studio where he learned the fundamentals of music production, not from formal education, but from obsessive, self-taught trial-and-error grind. He learned how to use digital audio workstations. He learned how to record, edit, mix, and arrange. He learned how to hear a finished song inside a raw instrumental. By the time he auditioned for Big Hit in 2010 and joined as a trainee, he wasn't walking in as a blank canvas. He was walking in as a producer who also happened to rap. And that distinction has defined his entire career and his entire recording process. Here's the key insight that separates Suga from every other member on this list. Yoongi doesn't experience the recording booth as a performer. He experiences it as a producer who temporarily steps into the performer's role. And that difference is everything. When most artists record, there's a separation between the person in the booth and the person behind the glass. The artist performs, the producer evaluates. The artist tries something, the producer decides if it works. That back and forth is a natural part of the process, but it takes time. Time to communicate, time to interpret feedback, time to adjust. With Suga, that separation essentially doesn't exist. He is both sides of the glass simultaneously. When he's in the booth delivering a take, he's already evaluating it with a producer's ear in real time. He knows within seconds, sometimes within syllables, whether a take is usable. He doesn't need the engineer to play it back. He doesn't need P-Dog to tell him that was a little flat on the 3rd bar. He already knows. He already stopped himself. He's already adjusting, and he's already delivering the next take before the engineer has even clicked the record button. This self-contained recording loop is breathtakingly fast. Producers who've worked with BTS have described Sugar sessions as almost eerily efficient, where other members might need the producer to be an active collaborator throughout the session, giving direction, offering alternatives, managing energy. Suga essentially produces himself. He'll walk into the booth, deliver his part with minimal takes, walk back to the control room, listen to the playback on the studio monitors with the engineer, make specific technical notes. The de-esser is hitting too hard on the second verse. Add 2 dB at 3K on the doubles. The vocal is competing with the synth at 2.5K. Try angling slightly off-axis on the mic, and either approve the take or go back in for a targeted re-record of only the specific phrases that didn't meet his standard. There's no wasted motion, no wasted takes, no exploratory wandering. Every action has a purpose, and every purpose is executed with the precision of someone who has been doing this since he was 16 years old. Let's talk about concrete examples, because the stories are almost unbelievable.
During the recording of the D2 mixtape, released in May 2020 under his August D moniker, Yoongi reportedly handled enormous portions of the production, recording, and mixing himself. Tracks like Daichita, which became a massive cultural moment with its fusion of traditional Korean instrumentation and hard-hitting trap production, were largely created within Yoongi's personal studio space, Genius Lab, at HYBE's headquarters. The recording process for his own rap parts on tracks like these was described as shockingly fast, not because the music was simple, but because Yoongi had been living with these songs for months during the production phase. By the time he sat down to actually record his vocals, the songs were already finished in his head. He knew every beat, every transition, every breath mark, every rhythmic pocket, because he built them. Recording was just the final act of transcribing what already existed in his mind onto a microphone. For group recordings, the dynamic is slightly different, but no less impressive. When Sugar records his parts for BTS tracks that he didn't produce himself, his process is still dramatically faster than most members because of his production literacy. A producer can give him highly technical feedback. Try pushing the nasal resonance on the hook. Your timing on the double time section is dragging by about 15 milliseconds. The vocal is competing with the synth at 2.5K. Try angling slightly off axis on the mic. And Yoongi understands every single word of it instantly. There's no translation layer. There's no confusion. There's no, what do you mean by that? He processes technical direction at the same speed a producer would, because he is a producer. That communication efficiency alone shaves enormous amounts of time off his sessions. And then there's the emotional dimension of his recording speed, which is fascinating because it seems to contradict the deeply emotional nature of his music. Songs like The Last, where he rapped with devastating honesty about his struggles with depression, social anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorder, or First Love, his solo track from Wings about his complicated relationship with music itself, are among the most emotionally raw pieces in BTS's entire catalog. You'd expect songs like that to require extensive emotional preparation, multiple takes to get into the feeling, long breaks to recover from the intensity of the subject matter. But multiple accounts suggest that Yoongi records emotional material with the same clinical efficiency as everything else. Not because he doesn't feel it. Anyone who has seen him perform The Last live knows that this man feels his music with every atom of his being, but because he processes his emotions before the session. The writing is where the emotional excavation happens. By the time the lyrics are finished, Yoongi has already lived through the feelings, metabolized them, and converted them into words. The recording is simply the delivery of something that's already been emotionally resolved. He doesn't need to find the feeling in the booth. He brings it in his pocket, fully formed, and deposits it into the microphone with the precision of a man who has already done the hard part alone. Let's also address the August D trilogy, August D in 2016, D2 in 2020, and D-Day in 2023. Across these three projects, Yoongi functioned as the primary producer, songwriter, arranger, and performer. The sheer volume of music created across these projects, combined with the quality and the critical acclaim they received, is a testament to his recording speed. D-Day, in particular, a full-length album with features from artists like IU, Ryuichi Sakamoto, and J-Hope, was produced during an incredibly busy period for BTS. The fact that Yoongi was able to write, produce, record, and finalize an entire album while simultaneously managing group schedules, solo appearances, and military service preparations speaks to a level of creative efficiency that borders on the absurd. But perhaps the most telling evidence of Sugar's recording speed comes from other producers' reactions. In various interviews and behind-the-scenes content, producers and engineers who've worked BTS sessions have casually dropped comments that paint a vivid picture. Yoongi's sessions are the ones they schedule when they need to stay on timeline. If a studio day is running long because another member's session went over, they know they can recover the lost time when Sugar's block comes up. He's the schedule saver, the efficiency anchor, the member who walks in, locks in, delivers, and walks out with time to spare, time that often gets reallocated to members who need more creative runway. So why isn't he number one? Because as impossibly fast as Min Yoongi is, there exists one member, one singular, almost mythological figure in the recording booth who operates at a speed that even Yoongi has acknowledged with something between admiration and disbelief. A member whose recording sessions are so fast that they've become legendary not just within BTS, but across the entire Korean music industry. A member who makes producers question the fundamental laws of how quickly a human being can absorb, internalize, and perfectly execute a piece of music they've never heard before.
Number 1. Jungkook. Jungkook, the golden maknae, the ending fairy, the man who has been called every superlative in the K-pop dictionary and somehow still manages to be underestimated because the things he does look so effortless that people forget they're supposed to be impossible. And here he is, sitting at the undisputed, uncontested, absolutely unchallenged number 1 spot on this ranking, the fastest BTS member in the recording booth. Not by a small margin, not by a slight edge, by a gap so wide and so absurd that producers, engineers, vocal coaches, and even his own members have spent over a decade trying to articulate just how unnervingly fast this kid works, and they still can't quite capture it. Because what Jungkook does in the recording studio doesn't just defy expectations, it defies logic. Let's set the stage with a number that gets thrown around so casually in the BTS fandom that people have stopped appreciating how insane it actually is. Jungkook was 15 years old when BTS debuted on June 13, 2013. 15! A 9th grader. A boy who just 2 years earlier had auditioned for the Korean talent show Superstar K in 2011, didn't make it past the early rounds, and then received casting offers from 7 different entertainment companies. 7! Before choosing Big Hit Entertainment because he watched RM rap and thought he was cool. That's the origin story. A literal child chose his entire life trajectory because he thought the leader of a small company's upcoming group was impressive. And from that almost comically simple beginning, Jungkook evolved into arguably the most naturally gifted recording artist in the history of Korean pop music. The stories about Jungkook's recording speed are legendary within the industry, and they all follow the same basic structure. Producer prepares the session expecting a normal timeline, Jungkook walks in, Jungkook finishes before the producer has mentally settled into the session, everyone stares at each other in confused silence. It's happened so many times that it's become a running joke, not just within BTS's production team, but among outside producers and songwriters who've had the experience of working with him. One of the most frequently cited examples comes from the recording of Euphoria, Jungkook's solo track that served as the intro for the Love Yourself Answer album in 2018. Euphoria is not a simple song. It's a sweeping cinematic pop ballad with a wide vocal range, demanding dynamic control, sustained high notes, layered harmonies, and an emotional arc that requires the vocalist to convey everything from tentative hope to overwhelming joy across 4 minutes. For most vocalists, even very talented ones, recording a song like this would be a multi-hour affair. You'd need time to warm up, time to find the right emotional register, time to nail the technically challenging sections, time to record the harmonies and ad-libs. It's a full session, maybe 2. With Jungkook, the main vocal recording was reportedly done with stunning speed. Not because he rushed, not because the producers accepted mediocre takes, but because his takes were good. His first takes were good. His cold, no warm-up, just walked into the booth and put on headphones takes were so consistently, infuriatingly good that the producers had very little to correct. The pitch was there, the emotion was there, the dynamics were there, the breath control on a song that demands extended phrases with minimal breathing opportunities was there from the start. The engineering team reportedly spent more time setting up the microphone and adjusting the headphone mix than Jungkook spent actually recording. Let that sink in. The technical preparation took longer than the human performance. That's not normal. That's not even talented. It's something else entirely. But how? How does a human being, even an extraordinarily gifted one, operate at that speed? The answer lies in a combination of 3 things that converge in Jungkook to create what producers have essentially described as a biological recording machine.
First, his ear. Jungkook possesses what vocal coaches and music educators describe as an exceptionally fast auditory processing ability. When he hears a melody, whether it's a demo guide vocal, a producer humming a phrase, or a song playing in the background of a variety show, it absorbs it almost instantaneously. Not just the notes, but the phrasing, the rhythmic feel, the emotional texture, the subtle stylistic choices that give a melody its character. Where most singers need to listen to a guide multiple times, slowly breaking it down section by section, Jungkook seems to capture the entire picture in 1 or 2 listenings. Producers have described watching him hear a guide vocal for the first time, nod once, walk into the booth, and reproduce it with 95% accuracy on the very first take. Not a rough approximation, not close enough to work with, 95% accurate, with the remaining 5% often being intentional stylistic choices he made because he thought they sounded better than the original guide. Second, his instrument. Jungkook's voice sits in a tenor range that is almost ideally suited for modern pop music production. It's bright enough to cut through a mix without excessive EQ boosting, warm enough to carry emotional weight without sounding thin, and flexible enough to shift between chest voice, mixed voice, and falsetto with minimal audible transition. From a pure recording standpoint, this is a producer's dream voice. It sits well in almost any arrangement, requires minimal pitch correction in post-production, and has a natural compression quality, meaning his loud notes and soft notes exist within a manageable dynamic range without needing heavy processing. All of this means that Jungkook's raw takes sound closer to finished than almost any other vocalist's raw takes. Less post-production means less time needed in the session to get usable material. The voice does the work that technology usually has to do, and it does it live, in real time, on the first take. Third, and this is the one that truly separates him from everyone else, his emotional immediacy. Most vocalists need time to get into the feeling of a song. They need to connect with the lyrics, find personal resonance, build an emotional foundation before they can deliver an authentic performance. Jungkook appears to bypass this process almost entirely. He has this almost unsettling ability to hear a song's emotional core within seconds of hearing the track and channel it immediately through his voice. Happy song? He's bright and soaring from take 1. Heartbreak ballad? His voice cracks with genuine vulnerability from take 1. Aggressive, high-energy track? The intensity is there literally from the first syllable. There's no warm-up period, no getting into character. He just is, immediately. Producers have described this as the single most remarkable thing about working with him, even more impressive than his pitch accuracy or vocal flexibility. Let's talk about Dynamite, BTS's first fully English-language single released in August 2020, which debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Recording an entire song in a non-native language is notoriously challenging because pronunciation, accent, and the natural musicality of the language all need to be consciously managed. Most Korean vocalists recording English-language pop tracks need extensive coaching on vowel shapes, consonant placement, and the subtle rhythmic differences between Korean and English phrasing. The process is slow, painstaking, and filled with re-records. Jungkook's English pronunciation on Dynamite was so clean, so natural, so rhythmically fluid that English-speaking listeners who heard the song without knowing BTS assumed the vocalist was a native speaker. And the recording process reflected that fluency. His sessions were notably swift, with producers commenting on how quickly he adapted to the English language delivery without sacrificing any of his natural vocal quality. The same pattern repeated with Butter in 2021 and Permission to Dance the same year. Each English language track, each potential pronunciation minefield, each handled with a speed and accuracy that made the production team's job almost suspiciously easy. And then there's his solo debut album, Golden, November 2023. This album is perhaps the ultimate showcase of Jungkook's recording efficiency because it features a staggering range of styles, from the Latin-influenced 3D featuring Jack Harlow to the pop-rock energy of Standing Next to You to the tender balladry of Hate You to the R&B smoothness of Please Don't Change featuring DJ Snake. Each of these tracks demanded a completely different vocal approach, a completely different emotional register, a completely different technical execution. For most artists, an album with this much stylistic variety would require months of vocal preparation and extensive session time for each track as they adjust to unfamiliar genres. Jungkook navigated this range with the kind of speed and adaptability that has become his signature. Standing Next to You, a track that channels Michael Jackson-level pop performance energy with complex rhythmic rhythmic vocal runs, and a demanding live performance-ready arrangement, was recorded with the kind of efficiency that reportedly left the international production team genuinely stunned. These were producers who had worked with major Western pop stars, and they were looking at each other across the control room like, is he serious right now? He was serious. He was done. He was already asking what they were having for dinner. Perhaps the most telling testament to Jungkook's recording speed comes from his own members. Suga, a man who, as we just discussed at number 2, is himself an absurdly fast and efficient recording artist, has openly acknowledged that Jungkook operates on a different level in the booth. In various behind-the-scenes moments, other members have jokingly complained that Jungkook finishes his parts so fast that he ends up having free time while they're still working on theirs. RM has talked about how he'll spend days agonizing over lyrics and delivery for a verse, and then watch Jungkook walk in, hear the guide once, and deliver a near-perfect take that sounds like he's been rehearsing the song for weeks. There's a mixture of admiration, disbelief, and affectionate exasperation in how BTS talks about Jungkook's studio abilities. The tone of people who've spent over a decade watching something extraordinary and still haven't fully processed it. But here's what makes Jungkook's #1 ranking truly special, truly meaningful beyond just he's fast. Speed without quality is worthless. Anyone can rush through a recording. What makes Jungkook the undisputed king of the BTS recording booth is that his speed comes with zero compromise in quality. His first takes often end up being the takes that make the final mix, not because the producers settled, but because there was genuinely nothing to improve. The pitch was perfect, the emotion was already authentic, the delivery was already exactly what the song needed. He didn't need 20 takes to find it. He didn't need extensive producer direction to shape it. The music went into his ears, something miraculous happened inside his brain, and it came out of his mouth fully formed, like he'd been singing the song his entire life. That's not just talent, that's not just training, that's something that lives at the intersection.
And there you have it, the full ranking from number 7 to number 1, straight from the recording booth to your screen. But before you close this out, let's take a step back and appreciate something that this entire list has been quietly telling you all along. There is no loser in this ranking, not a single one. Taehyung at number 7 takes the longest because he paints with his voice. Every session is an art installation. Every take is a brushstroke searching for the exact color that matches his soul. Jimin at number 6 records with the intensity of a man at war with his own impossibly high standards, and that war is exactly why his vocals make you feel things you can't even name. RM at number 5 rebuilds entire songs from the inside out before he ever touches the microphone, because for him, recording isn't just performing, it's architecture. Jin at number 4 is the living proof that greatness isn't something you're born with, it's something you build, session by session, year by year, until the boy who started from zero becomes the man whose voice makes stadiums weep. J-Hope at number 3 walks into every session armed with preparation so thorough that the recording itself becomes a victory lap, disciplined, precise, and devastatingly effective. Suga at number 2 operates on both sides of the glass with the efficiency of a man who has been living inside music studios since he was a teenager, a producer-performer hybrid whose speed is the product of over a decade of mastering every single aspect of the recording process. And Jungkook at number 1, the golden Maknae, the one-take wonder, the human being who makes world-class producers question reality, exists at a level of natural recording ability that the industry may not see again for a very, very long time. 7 members, 7 completely different approaches to the same process, 7 completely different reasons for being fast or slow, and every single one of those reasons is rooted in something beautiful: artistry, perfectionism, leadership, resilience, discipline, mastery, and pure God-given talent. That's the thing about BTS that this ranking really reveals. Their power was never about 7 identical people moving in lockstep. It was always about 7 wildly different human beings with different strengths, different insecurities, different creative languages, finding a way to pour all of that beautiful chaos into the same microphone and make it sound like one voice, one heart, one story.
The recording booth doesn't lie. It strips away the choreography, the stage outfits, the camera angles, the fan chants. It's just a person, a microphone, and the truth of what they can do. And in that booth, across hundreds of songs, across over a decade of music, every single member of BTS has proven in their own way, at their own speed, that they belong. Not because they're perfect, but because they never stopped trying to be. So the next time you press play on a BTS track, any track, close your eyes for a second. Listen to Taehyung's warmth. Listen to Jimin's ache. Listen to Namjoon's weight. Listen to Seokyeon's quiet strength. Listen to Hoseok's precision. Listen to Yoongi's razor edge. Listen to Jungkook's effortless fire. Every voice you hear went through its own journey to reach your ears. Every syllable carries hours, sometimes days of invisible work, invisible doubt, invisible triumph. That's not just music, that's 7 lives distilled into sound. And that, right there, is why they're not just the biggest group in the world, they're the most human. Thanks for sticking around to the very end. If this ranking surprised you, challenged you, or made you appreciate even one member a little differently, then it did its job. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and never stop listening to the stories hiding behind the music.